right. I think we gave enough time for everybody to jump in. So yeah, we can just go ahead and start. I can give a quick introduction of myself, and then we'll go ahead and introduce the panelists along with Joseph. So it's really nice to meet you guys, everybody. I'm Vicky. I am one of the co-founders of TechPod. Joseph and I created this to try to bring more opportunities for non-technical students interested in business to break into the business side of tech. And we're super excited to be presenting you guys our second panel of this week. And Joseph, do you want to give a quick intro of yourself as well?
Yeah, thanks, Vicky. I'm Joseph. I'm a senior at Michigan. I'm studying econ. And yeah, me and Vicky just are really excited to see everyone interested in like the business side of tech, because that's what we've been doing. And yeah, we're just hoping to connect people with more opportunities and give more education around these roles that are always talked about at college. Yeah, so if you're interested in learning more, definitely connect with us on LinkedIn, connect with the panelists on LinkedIn too, connect with each other on LinkedIn. Let's all connect with each other and follow TechPod as well.
Awesome. Yeah, and now we would love to introduce the panelists. Why don't you start us off, Serena?
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Serena, and I'm part of a company called Cisco Meraki, and I am a sales operations rep there. I've been with the company for 4 years, and a lot of what I do mainly revolves around a mix of field sales advising and a lot of key stakeholder talks with our senior management.
That's great. What about you, Vivian?
I'm Vivian. I'm a sales strategy and ops manager at Salesforce. So it's been a pretty fun journey. I'm happy to be here and kind of share my experiences from, coming from a non-biz tech background and then sort of getting into that space after undergrad. So very excited to see that there's a lot of interest today in that topic.
Awesome. And then finally, we have Tiffany.
Hey everyone, my name's Tiffany. I've been at VMware as a sales operations associate for a little over a year. So I'm still technically a little bit new. I went to UC Berkeley, studied environmental economics and policy, and I'm excited to tell you more about sales operations.
Awesome. Yeah, so we're going to go ahead and start off with some pre-selected questions from you guys. We received a bunch of questions and we tried to pick ones that covered areas that we felt were relevant to what people wanted to know. And so I think the first thing we should start off with is by talking about what sales operations is and introduce the audience to this role a little bit more. I've personally had a couple coffee chats and conversations with individuals in sales ops roles. And from what I've heard, it seems like this is a pretty data heavy role and somewhat takes skills from consulting. And so I thought it would be great to hear from you guys what are the day-to-day tasks of a sales or operations analyst. And anybody can like chime in on this.
Sure, I'm happy to kick it off, but as I like to kind of describe it to people who ask is there are kind of three main things that make up my day-to-day. So the first one is, of course, a lot of the data pulling, data scrubbing, kind of just pulling insights out. The other part is very much, I would say, working on the presentation and the sharing of the insights from the data, just because usually, there's so much that you can pull from the company database that you can plow through, but what people really get a lot of value from and what your stakeholders usually get a lot of value from is someone who can interpret it for them and give them sort of actionable takeaways. So that's another very big second piece that I spend a lot of my time on. And then of course, the third one is really just taking the time to meet with the stakeholders, meet with people, talk to people within the company and even outside and really get a pulse for and know what's happening in your industry from a sort of qualitative perspective. So I'd say that's a lot of my time. And if you want to break it up into actions, it's a lot of number crunching with computer meetings and more meetings. So that's usually my day to day.
Got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And anybody else?
Awesome. I'll go next. So my day to day, at least for Meraki, we have multiple branches within sales operations. We have different pillars. So we have field sales advising, we have sales acceleration, sales insights, sales acceleration, and the core sales operations team. So I'm in the field sales advising side where a lot of my day-to-day involves a lot of account management for field sales teams. We do a lot of cross-collaboration work with all the departments involving sales, ranging from legal team to finance team to the main operations teams here. So I like to think of sales operations as a whole is the heart of sales. So we do a lot of the data pulling and data integrity for them to enable them to succeed in their day-to-day. So we're the heart that makes sales succeed in the company. And I'd say 30% of my time is doing a lot of data work, which is involving a lot of cross collaboration and using technical skills within Salesforce. Another 30% is the soft skills with communications. You have to be able to communicate clearly and concisely when you're working with multiple teams to make projects happen. And the other 30% is just working amongst your fellow coworkers is to drive success as well.
Yeah, I heard a lot of similar types of activities that I would do on a day-to-day, but as a whole, I would describe sales operations as essentially supporting the processes that sell overall. Specifically to my day-to-day, there's a lot more to sales operations that I didn't know initially. There's a lot of forecasting, pipelining, which is a very sales activity, and it's very finance heavy, at least on my end. But some of the projects that I work on ultimately support the regional directors in Americas and globally.
Got it. Yeah, that was a great overview of what sales ops looks like for each of your different companies. And then I guess the next question for me would be, what advice would you have for recent graduates that are looking to get into sales operations? Is this role better for a specific type of person from a specific background, or what would you guys recommend? And anybody can start this off.
I would say that a very data-driven background is very important, but that wasn't actually required of me during my interview. So I think having exposure to Salesforce and a few coding languages like R and Python will definitely help you. But in VMware, they teach you how to manage different types of languages, if you will. So technical skills, like, you don't really need too much. But something to help you stand out against your competitors is speaking about your internship experiences that align specifically with sales operations. Anytime you really led a team, and anytime you created a process or managed it or figured out a process improvement.
Yeah, that's great. I think, like, from my experience too, a lot of the times I do not have experience in a specific type of role, but then I'm able to pull similar things that role might have, and then talk about them in my interviews. Yeah. Serena or Vivian, anything to add on to that?
Yeah, I think that you brought up a great point, Vicky, because I think that you have to remember these hiring managers do know that you're either still in college or it's your first job out of college, is they're looking for the soft skills, right? It doesn't have to be all the different internships you have. They want to see how you communicate and how you pull from different experiences, whether it's from your class projects or how you've led a club, and adapt and change the story to align and tailor it to the experience and skill sets they're looking for. So for me, I came from a non-target school. I was a pre-med major studying bio, and what I had done to show so that I had the potential was I tailored my experiences there and let my soft skills showcase. Is when I started the role, I didn't know Salesforce. I knew some R and like some Perl and Python, but every company is going to utilize those skills differently for their data management. And there are going to be times where you're going to learn something new depending on which company you go to. So I'd say, hey, my advice is try to let your soft skills shine through, and definitely network with as many people as possible, because how sales operation is run from one company to the next is very different.
Yeah,
Great,
that's a
great.
point. Yeah, and kind of building off what Serena and Tiffany both said, there's a lot of room for, even if you're not maybe from the background that the company it might look like it's looking for. So I also came from a bio background, not business at all, but now here I am in the biz tech space. But it's kind of like Serena said, you sort of have to build on the both soft skills and maybe some of the numerical hard skills that you might have from your degree or a past experience, and see how you can fit those and bring value to whatever your company you're applying to. But it's, I would say it's the most important part if you're coming from maybe not specifically the background that the hiring manager is looking for, to really just show your open-mindedness and adaptability and ability to switch from whatever you may have had your degree in or your previous internships in, and sort of show how you can bring those to something that might be a little bit different. So if to get a bit more specific for myself, I was previously I was previously working in a research hospital. So I did a lot of numerical analyses with clinical data. It's not business related at all. But then I applied for a role with Salesforce, and what they really were looking for was just that ability to, crunch through the numbers and draw some sort of insight, whether that be a clinical one or a business one. That was not the important part. The important part was just having the general skill to be able to look at the data, interpret it, and bring value to the stakeholder.
Yeah, that's great. And then kind of like going off of that, I see that there's a question in the audience, but then we also have it pre-selected. If you guys could explain what the Salesforce admin certification is, and whether or not that would be a requirement to be considered qualified as a sales operations analyst, and if that is used on a day-to-day basis in your role.
Well, I can go first on this one if no one has a take on it yet. But the easiest way to tell would just be, I don't want to be too glib about it, but to look at the job description, because usually if they absolutely need you to have that admin certificate, they will point it out straight away. That being said, it of course really doesn't hurt to have it before you apply for something, and to emphasize that you have it if they're looking for some sort of Salesforce experience. But personally, kind of going back again to job description, it sort of depends on what role you're applying for. I mean, I got the Salesforce admin cert, but I don't really have to leverage it in my day-to-day, but it's nice to have in case you ever want to use it for anything else in the future.
Yeah, I'd second that, Vivian, because for me, I currently don't have the Salesforce admin cert. I'm currently studying to actually take the exam. But my day-to-day, I applied and got the role without needing the cert. And some roles will require it. It's just reading the job description. And I'd say that the cert is good depending on what you want to do within sales operations. If your passion is more about building out different features for data integrity, and that company just happens to use Salesforce as their CRM, and then it'll be beneficial for you because the point of having the cert means that you're able to understand all the different components of Salesforce and utilize it to build out efficient processes. So like she said, it's different per role within sales operations. And depending on the role you get, a lot of the things you do within Salesforce on a day-to-day can be learned on the job.
So unlike Serena and Vivian, I actually didn't know about the certification prior to this call. So I will definitely look into it. And like what Serena just said, you can learn a lot of it on the job. It does seem very beneficial to, state that on your resume after you get the official certification. So personally, I'm going to look into it more.
Got it. Very cool. And then I guess like you guys kind of touched on this earlier, but I think a lot of people are wondering specifically what kind of technical or soft skills you would need to succeed in your role. Just because I think there's a lot of different functions of sales operations. So if you guys could go in a little bit more and talk about the different technical and soft skills required.
Technical skills wise, I don't use too much coding. Mostly it's just Excel, Salesforce. Salesforce is really interesting once you get to know all of the little, all of the different dashboards and different types of applications that are available on there. It's really a really great source. But in terms of technical skills needed on my end, there's not really too much. But I was quizzed on a few concepts or overall broad concepts, but not in the in-depth like Python queries.
I'd say for myself, the technical skills is Salesforce heavy. A lot of my day-to-day does require Salesforce reporting and building in a lot of the processes within Salesforce. There's for data integrity for the sales team. So it's definitely learnable on the job for my current role. But like we mentioned earlier, if you're wanting to learn more in depth about the systems and how they're built, the certification is a plus because it enables you to understand why that's like the most preferred platform and how you could build different features within Salesforce to enable you to be more successful in your processes and day-to-day within sales ops. I occasionally will use Excel. We work off the Google Sheets occasionally as well. In terms of soft skills, I'd say communication is key. You have to be able to command a room when you're speaking with different stakeholders. First, you're going to be speaking with field sales teams from different backgrounds, and you're going to be engaging with a lot of partner or distributors, and even customer facing, and they all come from different personalities, and you have to be able to navigate through both the more difficult conversations and the easy to get along with ones, but also be concise and clear when you're navigating in the room when there's a large project that's involving all these stakeholders.
That's great. Vivian, do you have anything to add to that?
Just emphasizing what Tiffany said about Excel. So I know it's not the most glamorous technical tool, but it's pretty pervasive and widespread in a lot of industries. So even if it's not that flashy compared to Python or any other coding languages, I would definitely say it's a must-have, good to brush up on some basic functions in case you're asked about these in a interview for your future ops role. And then, of course, very nice to have and hot topic right now is learning, a bit of SQL, Python, or some sort of basic coding language. That's always nice to have, especially if you're working for a company where the data warehouse might be more readily accessible for the employees there. Because it will kind of, I guess, depend on the size of your company, but depending on how large it is or how readily available they make their data to you, it might be more important for you to be able to know how to pull those out with code. So that's a good technical skill to have. From the soft skills side, definitely kind of like what Serena said, it's good to have people management skills. So at least for myself, my day-to-day involves a lot of prioritization of tasks and communicating with stakeholders and just working through out of the all the things that people are asking for from an ops perspective, just bringing out what is the most important one, which stakeholder needs it the most, just managing your time and kind of weighing between what happens if this one is late versus something else. I think that's very important. And even if all the technical skills aside, I think at the end of the day, in a sales ops role especially, it's important to remember that there's a person who will consume whatever you're producing or bringing out to the table. So it's very important to, just remember, no matter how much time you put into crunching something or how fancy you've written your code, that at the end of the day, the most important thing is really just that whoever has been asking you to see that insight or have that advice from you can actually understand what you've done.
Right, yeah. I think a lot of people tend to focus on what they need in terms of technical skills and like coding and stuff like that. But I definitely agree that soft skills are also extremely important in a lot of roles. And I want you to continue and to talk about that. So in terms of like soft skills, something that people have been doing, especially during quarantine, is reaching out to professionals for coffee chats or just other networking opportunities. And one question that came up a lot was what would be like the best way, since you guys have both been students and now working professionals, in your opinion and in your perspective, what would be the best way for a student to reach out to professionals in pursuit of either like coffee chat opportunities or networking opportunities?
I can probably speak to this first. I would say that LinkedIn is the best platform to do so. It's really easy to find alumni from your school. And if you're specifically interested in sales operations, which is why you're attending this call, you can easily search up those in the field on LinkedIn super easily. That's what I did prior to my interview. I cold LinkedIn a few, not only VMware individuals in sales operations, but also other smaller startups, just to get a better understanding of the field, since it wasn't too popular at the time. A lot of these professionals that I reached out to were really willing to help me out, since I told them I had an upcoming interview and I basically just wanted to learn more about the field. Once you emphasize that whole learning aspect and that you're a student, I think most of the time professionals are really willing to help.
Yep. Well, as somebody who's received a whole bunch of cold LinkedIn messages, I'd say it definitely helps when you sort of explain where you're coming from. Like as a student, you're really hoping to learn more about the role and definitely expressing interest in whoever you've reached out to and kind of hearing how they got there, or just if they have any general advice that they can share with you. So that's that's definitely very helpful. The other one that I say I respond quite a bit to is when people kind of try to emphasize any similarities. So things like, we went to the same school, or I noticed something on your profile that's also like something I'm interested in getting into, or things like that. So definitely helps when you kind of think of the human aspect of it when you reach out to people.
Yeah, I wanted to echo off of Tiffany and Vivian. It's really hard, right, when you first start networking and like what other place to start first than to your fellow alumni. Okay, you can start with the common ground that you both went to the same school and you're interested in their career journey. There's alumni networks across all schools, and I think that alumni does love to give back, how to help with their future per generation of students. And if you do see that that's like a first common ground, try to make it personalized. And next, LinkedIn is a great platform now that we're all virtual in this space. So do take the time to make personalized messages. Some people, they get to many messages in a day. Some people, they have their day jobs. So don't be discouraged if you don't get a response right away. Try to find the common ground and personalize the message. And if someone in a company that you genuinely really want to go into, don't be afraid to follow up.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's something that like a lot of students need to hear. I've spoke to a couple people where they felt a little intimidated to reach out to professionals on LinkedIn. But I think there's a lot of people that are willing to help, especially if you bring up similarities like Vivian mentioned. And yeah, so now we're gonna go ahead and move on to some live audience questions. So if you have not voted yet on Slido, make sure to do that. And we will go off depending on which ones were the most upvoted. So here's a question from Angelo. How do you prepare for a sales ops interview? Oh, and adding on to that, is it possible to break into sales ops from a pure sales role, like SDR?
Yeah, I can speak to both parts of the question. Sorry, the first one was how do you prepare? You do a lot of company research, what their products are, and get a really solid understanding of the business and what product they're selling. In regards to how I form my interview answers, I think you need to think of specific projects you worked on. If you're in a leadership position, and really specific situations that you're into that kind of challenge your mindset, because they'll definitely ask you these soft skilled behavioral questions that'll kind of challenge you, and you can pivot these challenges to show how you really excelled while working cross-functionally as a leader, and how you made a process better. And for the second part, I think it is possible for a sales development representative to get into sales ops. I think I've spoken to a few individuals who actually done that, not only at my company, but also across the tech industry. I think you coming into sales ops as a SDR, you get a better understanding of the overall sales methodology, since you're client facing and sales operations isn't really client facing. So I think that's a lot of potential there.
That's great. And if nobody else has anything else to add on to that, we can move on to the next question. Somebody was wondering, what are the top or most commonly used softwares for sales operations roles? And this could be specific to your role.
Well, I work at Salesforce, so I'll definitely say that. Our CRM is one of the top tools that we use a lot. Also Excel quite a bit, as I'm sure you kind of got the feel for. And then just visualization software in general. So it could be, I mean, you could use the ones in Excel, you could have packages from Python that you use for those. You could use Tableau or any of your other, favorite way of visualizing data, but just any of those, I would say, kind of completes out the package of the tech skills that you would need.
Yeah, for myself, we use Salesforce is the most. It is a really popular CRM within Cisco, and Meraki. I'd say number two, like Cisco has their own coding tools. It's called Cisco Commerce Workspace. Okay, so I'm usually on that platform. The second, and I'd say the third, visualization. We use Excel pretty often there too.
Besides what's been mentioned already, I think we use SAP Business Objectives to keep a lot of our data in there. So when I first was exposed to it, it was honestly pretty overwhelming. So if you get a chance to look into it a little bit, I think that'll definitely be helpful.
Got it. Yeah. And then we'll take maybe like one or two more questions from the audience. But the next question would be, what are some challenges that you face within sales operations? And how do you typically overcome them or get used to them as you go along with your career journey?
I think a pretty big one that's very applicable for students, because I also had this issue when I graduated, is just the 80-20 rule whenever you're working on projects. So there, especially for your first job, there's a lot of, I guess, at least for me, a lot of pressure to, make sure the work is perfect before you hand it off, or that everything looks really, really correct before you're showing it to your boss or your stakeholders. But I would say that in a working environment versus when you're in academia and school, is that people are very busy and they are very, it's very fast paced in a sales ops. So usually if someone is asking for something, they will usually be quite understanding if it's not completely all the way there. They would much rather see something that is in progress or a partial 80% answer versus waiting until it's a little too late for you to give them that perfect 100%. So I would say I think that's pretty applicable for students, and even for me sometimes, to kind of balance that need between the speed and getting it 100%.
Yeah, the 80-20 rule is so important, and I have to remind myself to do that on a daily basis too, because you're going to be in an environment where you might take on long-term projects too, and sometimes tasks just don't get done in a day's time. So it's better to provide a status update rather than not saying anything at all. And always remember, it's okay to ask for help. There's times when you have projects where it can be overwhelming, and it's better to reach out and collaborate than to struggle on your own.
Thanks for kind of introducing the 80-20 rule. I personally kind of have if I don't do things 100% perfect, I do feel bogged down by that. And I think a lot of my peers also feel that way. So I've actually wasn't familiar with the rule before, so I'm glad it was kind of introduced to us today. But I think in general, from the past mistakes that I've made, others were pretty understanding, and it's kind of like a rookie mistake.
Got it, yeah. And then now we're gonna move on to resume reviews. And we were able to pick 3 resumes from the dozens of resumes that were submitted. So we will check out whose resume got selected. Everybody who got selected were anonymized, so your information won't be shown, but this is something that I'm really excited to hear because I'm currently in the recruitment cycle myself. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with everybody. All right, so this is the first resume. Can everybody see my screen okay?
Yep.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right, yeah. So I would love to hear what you guys think about this resume, maybe like the format, and especially in the perspective of somebody who would be looking to cater their resume towards a sales operations role. And let me go ahead and just zoom in a little bit. And yeah, feel free to anybody to start and make comments on it and suggestions for improvement.
I think this individual did a really good job describing the percentages, and you can see how impactful his or her efforts were in the previous positions.
I think for me, well, everyone has a different resume style, but for me personally, I feel that he or she can omit the summary portion and try to just let the experience speak for themselves. Because I think that if you can tailor experience with results within data driven and bullet points, and that can be your highlight versus having a summary. And you can also leverage that space to expand on the two roles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so echoing what everyone said, I think having the numbers there is very helpful, especially for an ops or a sort of process focused role. The summary, I kind of like it because it sort of ties back or really hammers home what the experiences are supposed to be driving towards. But I guess it could be a bit shorter if somebody needed more real estate to add more details and the other past experiences. So I wouldn't get rid of it completely, but kind of like what Serena said, if somebody wanted to put more in the experience and the trade-off was trimming the summary, then I would, definitely vote for putting more in the experience section.
Got it. Yeah, this is great feedback. I remember initially I also had a summary at the beginning of all my resumes, but I think as I continued to build on with more experiences, I eventually had to take that section off to make room for my experiences. And let's move on to the next one. So this is the second resume that was chosen, also anonymized. Would love for you guys to provide feedback on this as well. And let me know if it's big enough on the screen for audience and panelists. Want to make sure you guys are able to see everything.
I would definitely try to put the more quantitative outcomes near the top of each of the experiences, because I do see that there are some points in there where the outcome is listed, like the facilitating transactions of 10,000 units of product. But personally, because I am in a sales ops role and I really look for those things, it kind of helps if these are either at the very top or at the very bottom of each piece of experience that's listed out.
Yeah, I think that there is potential here to tailor a lot of these bullet points here to be more quantitative. I think that Vivian brought up a great point. I always like to start off my first 2 bullet points with a bang, right? You always want to be like the highlight key thing that you've done in this role to be the first thing that the recruiter or hiring manager reads. Mm-hmm. And the best way to do that is with a quantifiable result. So for example, I'd move all the data points that you quantify, just move it to the top. And for example, the cold calls to potential clients and working to facilitate transactions of 10,000 units. My tip when I'm writing out these bullet points is that after I write them out, I reread it and I ask myself, why is this important for my hiring manager to know? So, and try to think of tailoring your bullet points to be results driven. Did this make an impact on like the company, or like what impact did it make, and why is this important for your hiring manager to know? Because when you think about the why when you're writing these out, I think you'll be able to write out a more like concise, is at least to tailor to the job description, and to be able to show that you've added value and impact.
Along with what everyone else said, I would kind of work on the spacing, and it would help to actually expand on the leadership experiences and cut down on the professional experiences with regards to Dick's Sporting Goods and Mount St. Antonio College. I understand those are significant roles, but it would be more helpful to expand on like academic experiences a little bit more.
Great, yeah. I would also agree with that. I think spacing, just to make it easier for the recruiter to be able to go through the resume is also important, and quantifiable experiences so that the recruiter or interviewer is able to visually see the impact that you're making for each role. And we have our final, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if I could just give maybe like an example. I've noticed a theme here on these bullet points is the present tense, right? Initiating, conducting, collecting. I think a better way to change this is to word it as if you're making a statement. So instead of saying, let's see, improving customer experience with knowledge of apparel and attracting attention to expand store sales, maybe try saying things that you've like facilitated transactions through cold calls, or you've increased store sales through improving the product presentation. And so the goal or the end result should be at the forefront of what you're trying to say in each bullet point, if that makes sense.
Yes. That's great. Okay. Thank you for giving like a specific example, and hopefully whoever's resume this is, hopefully you're in the call right now. Really helpful for people looking to improve. And then we have our very last resume before we move on to the coffee chat raffle. And hopefully that is big enough. And seems like this person is a recent grad.
So I think one thing I would call out is maybe putting some name mentions of the tools or the software that were used, because it does look like there's no, I guess there is, listing of the tools at the bottom, but it does sort of help if there is room to fit some of those in the experience section as well, just so that people can easily see that you've been leveraging the skills in an actual work environment versus having them just listed. So that could be helpful. And then similar to the previous one, it also does help to try to put the numerical bullet points near the top.
Yes. Yeah. I actually have for my resume, my like the programs that I know how to use at the bottom too. So I think that's like super helpful. And I will most likely begin incorporating that into the actual body portion of my resume. Yeah. And anything from Serena or Tiffany? It can be like things that they did well as improvements.
I really liked how they made sure, at least within the leadership section, that they added their quantifiable results there of their efforts from being in this role. So I really loved how they highlighted that, because it showcases to their recruiter, like they're able to take on large tasks and they have made an impact with the results highlighted on the bullet point. I hope to see that more in the roles that they have in the professional experiences, especially in your most recent role. You should try to have as much like data-driven endpoints in there as well, since that's going to be the top experience that you're looking at when you're reviewing a resume from the top down. I'd say that if you have multiple roles that did similar tasks, I know that as a new grad or those who are still in college, you are very inclined to just put in all your skill sets and try to cram in as much as you can in one page, right? But you also have to take a step back and think like, okay, like which of the four similar roles, which is the one role which highlights and showcase the full skill set that this job is looking for, and let's try to minimize that so that I can like expand more on that role, so with more data-driven points to show that I did earn all these skills here that matches is the sales ops role that I'm looking for.
I agree with everything Vivian and Serena pointed out. One specific example, if you can't find like a specific data point, you can, with the first experience, the first bullet point, you kind of mention media landscape, best approach to media, and key metrics. I think as an operations individual, they're going to be really interested in the metrics, what those metrics were, how they were calculated, stuff like that. And I think it's really funny how all three of us kind of were like, oh, where are the numbers? But that's one way to kind of spin this training program into more of an ops and data-driven role.
Yes. Yeah. So it seems like the theme for all these resumes were to put more numerical metrics on them to really be able to show impact. And yeah, I think this is all really great. Hopefully we're able to help a lot of people out in the audience. And now I'm going to pass it off to Joseph for the coffee chat raffle. So if you guys would like a coffee chat opportunity with one of the panelists,